Hi, my name is Dave, and I am 19 years old. I just made this channel where I'll be sharing my reading journey with you. This channel is like a voice memo of my adventure through a book. I'll talk about the books I've read, share my thoughts, and rate them from 1 to 5 stars in my review. So, why did I start this channel? Well, reading has always been tough for me since I was a kid. I have trouble concentrating and focusing, which made me miss out on important reading skills. But this channel is my way of overcoming those challenges and rediscovering the joy of reading. And even though English isn't my first language, I'll be speaking English and primarily reading English books. It's a great opportunity for me to improve my language skills and exploring exciting stories. So, let's dive into all the books I've read. The first book that I read, They Both Die at the End by Adam Silvera. The story follows the two main characters, Medio and Rufus, who live in a world where if you're going to die, you'll be notified through your phone. The app is called Deathcast, and it basically notifies you the day that you will die so that you can go out and live your life to the fullest. The main characters agree to meet each other up through the Last Friend app. So they meet each other up, and along the way they both discover themselves and searching for the meaning of what it's like to truly live a life. As they spend more time together on their last day, they develop a friendship and maybe even something more than that. So that's basically the synopsis of the book. I would rate this book 4 out of 5 stars. I might be a little biased because it has queer relationships in it, even though the romantic relationship is not the main focus of the story, in a sense that when I read the book, it makes me think about life and how we tend to spend our lives being afraid to do the things that we want and the time we've wasted. And if we were to die tomorrow, would we be satisfied with the life that we live? And the relationship is just added to make it more dramatic. I still think it provides a solid representation for the gay community. What I like about this book is the simplicity of the writing. Like I've mentioned before, English isn't my mother tongue, but I found this 256-page novel to be very easy to read. The pacing, in my opinion, isn't very nice. There are scenes where one main character is going through so many things at time and the other one doesn't do anything that much until the next 80 pages. And that's where I feel bored, reading the two contrasting stories that never seem to collide. I love that we get to see stories from different perspectives as well and how they add to the main story. The book always leaves clues for us to connect the dots instead of straight up telling us everything. The relationship between the two main characters feel natural and real, which is why the ending hit us so hard even though we reader already know how the story will end. Overall, it's a solid YA adventure sci-fi romance novel to read during Pride Month. The next book that I read is called The House of Hollow by Crystal Sutherland. The story follows the 3 Hollow sisters who went through something unexplainable when they were children, and now they are changed for life. It's a mystery of the 3 children who suddenly disappeared under very suspicious circumstances, especially the fact that no one, not even they, know where they were or what happened to them. When they found the children, they were all naked and covered in blood. After they have the children back, weird things started happening. For example, all the sisters had black eyes, but their eyes started turning blue. Their originally dark brown hair slowly turned white. They all grow up to be this mysteriously beautiful girl, and the story begins when the oldest sister, Gray, disappears again. I rated this 4 out of 5 stars purely because of the simplistic writing. It was very easy to fly through this novel. I finished this novel in 3 days. The atmosphere of the story was dark and gloomy and wet, considering it took place in London and Scotland. The way the author described things was very well written. For instance, he would introduce a word I didn't know before, but then explain it later in the next paragraph, making it so convenient. I didn't have to look up words in the dictionary every 10 minutes while I read this novel. As someone who just started reading English novels, I was very impressed. There are a lot of creepy things happening in the story as well. people vomited flowers, ants and insects crawled out from beneath human flesh, and there was this weird half-naked man wearing a bull skull lurking in the woods, and all the spooky shit you could imagine. While reading this, I was reminded so much of Stranger Things, the Netflix show. And in fact, this whole novel could have been named Stranger Things, and I wouldn't question it because it fits the story so well. I don't feel like the characters were developed that well. Except for Iris, the main character, she still has some sense of morality in her. She has her own agency. Even though she sometimes seemed a little bit flip-flop towards the third act, it got very repetitive with her constant focus on her disappearing sister. I adore Vivi the most out of the three sisters. She is like the middle sister. She's a cool punk rock sister who acts like she doesn't care about you, but she will do anything to protect you. She is the funniest out of the three sisters and very rebellious and sarcastic. And I really like how Vivi view her own beauty as something cursed, something to be concealed. She got tattoos over her moon half scars at the neck that all the three sisters have, which people always say that those scars are mysteriously charming. She hated it so much, so she got tattoos to cover up those scars. And she shaved her white blonde hair off, and she pierced her face with enough metal to hide her features. And I like that. I like that she had insecurity, and it made her feel like a real person. The reason I didn't give this 5 stars though is that I didn't fully grasp on the story's message or the commentary it was trying to deliver. It had a nice story and nice writing, okay, but whatever message the story was trying to convey, I didn't get it. Maybe it's not the book's fault. Sometimes a story doesn't have to have a clear message or meaning to it. You can just read a book simply just for fun. The next book I've read is The Deep by River Solomon. The Deep is about the pregnant African slaves who were thrown off the side of the slave ships and gave birth to water-breathing children, who then became mermaid-like creatures called the Wajinru. Within this group of people, there is an individual known as the historian, who is chosen to hold all the memories of the past history of the Wajinru. It's about one of the historian, Yetu, who breaks from tradition to find herself and ultimately reconnects with the history of her people. I struggled to read the first 30 pages of this book so badly. There were too many words that I didn't know, and I was so confused about what's going on. I almost gave up on reading it, and when I decided to look up other people's review, I realized that I wasn't the only one who's struggling with it. The writing at the beginning felt like a stream of consciousness. The author would mention how people feel, things that used to happen, things that didn't happen. It was very vaguely described, making it so hard for me to feel invested in the story. However, after getting through the first 30 pages, things became more interesting. Actual events started happening rather than just conceptual ideas. I didn't find any of the characters, including the main character Yetu, to be that interesting. I felt that the characters weren't very well developed. Again, for instance, her mother was very one-dimensional and always mean and bitter to her daughter for no reason. Ori's relationship with Yetu also felt really rushed. I thought they were cute together, but I didn't feel any chemistry or deeper connection. And I do like the world building though, and how mermaids came to be the way they are. However, since it's a 160-page novel, the author didn't really dive deep enough into expanding the world building as much as I would have liked. I love the commentary in this book. It seems to be the author's strength since their debut novel. I appreciate how they draw parallels between the fantasy world and the real world and making it nuanced. It makes you think about what defines you as a person, and without the history and the people who came before you, would you still be yourself? It also sheds light on how humans can be terrible not to only other creatures and animals, but also to themselves too. I don't have much to say about this book, but basically it's a refreshing take on mermaids. Although the story doesn't feel like a complete story, but it still gives you a lot to think about regarding history and the world. The last book I've read is called Legend by Mary Lou. Legend is a YA dystopian novel set in the future where America is divided into different sectors and referred to as the Republic. The country is currently at war with its neighbor. The story follows the two main characters, Day, a boy who lives in the poor sector and later becomes involved in a murder, becoming the prime suspect for killing the brother of June, a girl that resides in the rich sector. Their paths cross, and together they uncover shocking truth about their government. It was a very addictive book to read, despite it being very predictable like most of the YA dystopian novels. The government or the rulers are secretly bad and the main characters need to uncover the truth and rebel against them. The writing is very simple, and I do like simplistic writing. The characters are okay, I guess. I really like Day and Tess for the most part. However, June, the main girl, she can be so frustratingly dumb at times that I would scream out loud in confusion as to why she can't figure out something so obvious. But you could argue that that's the point. She has to be ignorant in contrast to Day so she can learn the truth later on and all that. But still, one thing I was somewhat disappointed about this book is the lack of strong world building. Personally, when I read or watch a dystopian stories, I really enjoyed a detailed exploration of how the governments in these worlds came to be, how they operate, and why they enforce a certain rule. For instance, in this book, they have this thing they called a trial, where the children take a test administered by the government when they turn 10 years old. And based on their score, they are sorted into different places. Those with high scores go to the best university, while those with low scores are sent to labor camps. I would have loved to know more about the reasons behind this system, how did they work and why they work. But in the end, since it's a trilogy, I suppose I will have to read more to learn more about the world and its details. However, I still feel like the author could have emphasized more on the world building. So I rated this 3 out of 5 stars because while I had a good time reading it, it's not enough to convince me to read the rest of the book in the trilogy.